One night, people across the city suddenly began to disappear. Whatever position they were in, they vanished exactly like that, as if their bodies dissolved into thin air. Only their clothes, shoes, and personal belongings were left behind. And, strangely enough, something almost exactly like this had happened once before, back in 1590. But the question is, why are people disappearing like this in an instant? And where did it all begin? To understand that, we have to go to a movie theater in Detroit, America. It was the evening show. The theater was full of people, all staring at the screen, watching the movie. Inside the projection room, a young man named Paul was sitting alone, reading a book. Paul worked at this theater as the projection operator, and his favorite hobby was reading. The book he was reading that night was called The Lost Colony of Roanoke. It was based on a real historical mystery. According to the book, in 1590, everyone on an island called Roanoke suddenly disappeared. After they vanished, there were no bodies, no clear clues, no explanation. Only one word was found carved into a wall. That word was Croatoan. Paul became so absorbed in the book that he did not even notice the movie had reached intermission. During the break, he went to talk to one of his female friends. Then he restarted the movie and returned to his place. And at that exact moment, all the lights in the theater suddenly went out. Darkness fell over the entire building. At first, Paul thought it was just an ordinary power cut. But then he realized something was wrong. The emergency lights should have turned on, so he turned on his flashlight and stepped outside to see what had happened. But when he reached the hallway, what he saw made absolutely no sense. Clothes were scattered all across the floor. Shoes, wallets, bags, everything was lying there. But there were no people. Only a few moments earlier, that hallway had been crowded. People were buying popcorn. People were talking. People were walking around. But now, there was only silence. The first thought that hit Paul's mind was, where did everyone go? He walked into the theater hall. And there, he saw the same thing. Clothes were lying on the seats. But not a single person was there. Seeing all of this, Paul felt a cold fear run through his body. Frozen between terror and disbelief, he sat down in one of the seats. And that was when he noticed the security guard. The guard looked just as confused as Paul. He also had no idea what had happened, so the two of them began checking the entire building together. But they could not find anyone. Then, suddenly, the security guard saw someone in the distance and walked toward them. But at that exact moment, Paul's flashlight began to flicker. As the light grew weaker, Paul felt something strange. He felt as if someone was watching him from the darkness. When he looked ahead again, the security guard was gone. Only his uniform was left on the floor. Paul's heart nearly stopped. The darkness around him no longer felt empty. It felt alive. It was slowly moving toward him. Paul ran down toward the basement. There was a generator there. But when he looked back, he saw a black shadow. The shadow had the shape of a human being, but it was so dark, so dense, that it almost looked unreal, and it was rushing straight toward him. Paul screamed, but before he could escape, the shadow swallowed him completely. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a nurse named Rosemary was searching for her 9-month-old baby inside a hospital. Rosemary worked the night shift. Every day, she left her baby in the hospital daycare while she worked. That night, she had taken a short break and gone outside to smoke on the balcony. But when she came back inside, the whole hospital was dark, and she could not find anyone anywhere. At first, she thought maybe there had been some kind of evacuation, but if that had happened, someone would have told her, so she ran straight to the daycare. But when she got there, she saw only toys and clothes scattered across the room. Her baby was nowhere to be found. The sight broke Rosemary from the inside. She screamed her baby's name again and again, but there was no answer. Then, almost losing her mind, she began searching the entire hospital. At one point, she entered an operating room, and what she saw there shocked her even more. A patient was still lying on the operating table, but there were no surgeons, no nurses, no medical staff. It looked as if everyone had disappeared in the middle of the surgery, and right at that moment, the operating lights went out. Then the patient, who was still lying there cut open, vanished right in front of Rosemary's eyes. Rosemary screamed in terror and ran out of the room. In her hand, she had only a tiny pen light. That little light was now her only hope inside the dark hospital. She had no idea what was happening, but one thing became very clear to her. Wherever there was darkness, there was danger, and that darkness could take her at any moment. From Rosemary's story, we now move to a TV reporter named Luke. When Luke woke up in the morning, he saw that the candles beside his bed had burned all the way down. He got up and called for his wife, Emma, but there was no response. He searched the entire apartment. Emma was nowhere to be found. His phone was dead, so he could not call her either. Luke assumed Emma had probably gone somewhere early in the morning, so he quickly got ready and opened the door to leave. But outside the door, he noticed a newspaper, and then he realized something strange. It was not today's newspaper. It was from the previous date. Then he went down to the street, and what he saw there was unbelievable. Detroit, a normally busy city, was completely empty. Not a single person was in sight. Cars were abandoned all over the road. Some engines were still running, but there were no drivers. Clothes were scattered across sidewalks and streets, and the entire city looked as if every human being had simply vanished. Luke kept walking through the empty streets. His mind was trying to understand everything. Then suddenly, a plane flew extremely low over his head, and moments later, it crashed into a building. In the distance, Luke panicked and ran toward his office, but when he reached the office, he saw the same scene again. Nobody was there. Inside the TV studio, the cameras were still on, but the cameraman was gone. Then Luke noticed a news report playing on one of the screens. A man was looking into the camera and saying that some people were still alive in Chicago. They had taken shelter inside a church, so anyone who still had a source of light should try to get there as quickly as possible. But before Luke could hear the entire report, the power went out, and he realized something terrible might happen in the darkness. So he quickly opened the curtains and let sunlight into the room. During the day, he was somehow safe. But what would happen when night came? No one knew. 3 days passed like this. Luke was now wandering through the city alone. He was searching for food, batteries, and anything else that could help him survive. One night, he was looking for a car that still had battery power. After checking many vehicles, he finally found a pickup truck. Its headlights were still on. Seeing that, Luke climbed into the truck and tried to start it. But just then, a man came running toward him. The man had a flashlight in his hand, but the light was flickering. That meant the battery was almost dead. The man begged Luke for help. He said, "Please, give me a battery too. If you don't, I'm going to die." But Luke did not want to help him, because by now, he knew that everyone left alive was fighting for themselves. The man kept begging again and again. But Luke was too busy trying to start the truck, and then, at that exact moment, the man's flashlight went out completely. The next second, a black shadow came out of the darkness and swallowed him. His weak scream vanished into the air, and all that remained on the road were the clothes he had been wearing. In other words, the man literally disappeared right in front of Luke's eyes. Seeing this, Luke jumped out of the truck and ran for his life. His heart felt like it was about to burst out of his chest. He now understood that this darkness was not ordinary. It was something alive, something that could swallow people in the blink of an eye. After running for a while, Luke suddenly stopped in front of a bar. He saw that the lights inside the bar were still on. That meant there had to be a generator running inside, so he rushed in. The entire bar was empty, but the lights were still working. Luke went to the counter, opened a bottle of whiskey, and drank from it. Just then, something strange happened. All the lights in the bar began to flicker. Luke realized the generator was probably running out of fuel, so he ran down to the basement, where the generator was kept. He added fuel and started the generator again. Lights came back on. For a moment, Luke finally felt a little relieved, but then he suddenly heard a noise behind him. When he turned around, he saw a small boy named James standing there, holding a gun. James shouted, "Who are you? What are you doing in my bar?" Luke tried to calm him down. He said, "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just trying to survive, like you." Hearing this, James slowly lowered his guard. Then he explained that the bar actually belonged to his father, his. Mother had told him to stay there, because 3 days earlier, she had gone to a church looking for help. Luke sadly told him that if his mother had not returned in 3 days, she probably never would. He also said that if James stayed there, he would die too, because the generator would not keep running forever. But even after hearing all of that, James said with sadness in his voice, "My mom told me to stay here, so I'm staying here." At that exact moment, another door of the bar opened, and the nurse Rosemary came in. Her eyes were red, her hair was completely messy, and in her hand, she was holding a glowing stick. She screamed, "Where is my baby? Did you hide my baby?" Luke tried to calm her down, but Rosemary pulled a pistol from her bag and aimed it at him. She shouted, "Give me my baby right now, or I'll shoot." Luke told her, "Listen, your baby is not here. We're trapped here too, just like you." Hearing this, Rosemary slowly came back to her senses. Then she broke down crying. James gently went closer to her and tried to comfort her. After calming down, Rosemary explained that she worked at the hospital. She said she had stepped outside for only 5 minutes. And when she returned, everyone was gone. She had been searching for her baby for 3 days. She thought maybe her husband had taken the baby, because he often came to this bar. Then Luke asked her, "How have you survived for 3 days? I don't even see a flashlight with you." Rosemary showed them the glow sticks. She explained that these had kept her alive. The hospital had many of them, and these glow sticks could shine for up to 12 hours without batteries. Then she placed one glow stick around James's neck too. After that, the 3 of them sat together and discussed the news report Luke had seen. The reporter had said there were still survivors in Chicago, so if they wanted to survive, they had to get to Chicago. Somehow, but how would they get there? Luke told them about the pickup truck he had found on the road. Since the truck was still running, they needed to use it to escape. But while they were talking, they suddenly heard a scream from outside. Someone was shouting, "Help! Please help me!" Hearing that desperate voice, Rosemary rushed toward the door to help, but Luke stopped her. He said, "I'll go outside. Do not open the door until I call your names." Then Luke carefully stepped outside with a flashlight. The street was dark all around. Only a few streetlights were still glowing in the distance. Luke pointed his flashlight around. Then he saw a man lying beneath a lamppost. The man's leg was bleeding. When Luke reached him, we see that it was Paul, the projection operator from the theater. Paul cried out, "Help me! Please help me!" Luke picked him up on his shoulder. But at that exact moment, Paul's flashlight went out, and because the light disappeared, the dark shadows began moving toward them. Luke panicked and started dragging Paul with him. Then he pulled out a flare from his pocket and lit it. Red light spread all around them, and the shadows disappeared behind them. Somehow, Luke managed to get Paul back inside the bar. They laid Paul on a table. Rosemary carefully cleaned his wound and bandaged it. When Paul regained consciousness, he told them that he worked at the theater. He said that after his flashlight went out, those black shadows tried to drag him away, but by luck, he fell under a streetlight and survived. Then Paul told them about the mysterious story of Roanoke Island. He explained how, in 1590, an entire colony of people suddenly disappeared. He said the same thing had happened back then. People simply vanished into the air. Only their belongings were left behind. After hearing this, Rosemary said that maybe this was God's punishment. People had sinned too much, and now they were paying for it. But Luke became angry after hearing that. He said, "If this is punishment, then what sin did your 9-month-old baby commit? This is not punishment. This is SE." She was calling from outside. "James, I'm back. Open the door." James jumped up in happiness and ran toward the door, but Rosemary grabbed him tightly. She said, "Stop, James. That is not your mother. It's a trap." James began crying and said, "No, I know my mother's voice." But Luke held him back and said, "Listen to me. I heard someone on TV say these shadows can copy the voices of the people you love. They use those voices to trap you. Just think how terrifying that is." Then the voice came, from outside again, James. "I'm in pain. Please open the door for me." James was shaking uncontrollably. Tears were rolling down his face, but he did not go to the door. After a while, the voice slowly disappeared. The next morning, the sun rose. Now the three of them were ready. Luke and Rosemary went outside. Since there was still sunlight on the street, it felt much safer. They walked for about a block and found the truck. It was still there. The headlights were still on, but the light was already becoming weak. They went behind the truck and started pushing it. The truck was heavy. They could barely move it, but with all their strength, they pushed harder. Slowly, the truck began to move forward. After some distance, Luke suddenly slipped. He badly twisted his ankle. Luke screamed in pain and fell to the ground. Rosemary caught him and asked, "Are you okay?" But Luke said he could not walk. His foot was badly injured. Rosemary helped him sit down and began massaging his ankle. At that moment, Rosemary suddenly saw a little girl standing across the street. The girl was holding a doll. Rosemary called out to her, "Hey, come here! We can save you!" The little girl looked at them for a few seconds, but suddenly her eyes widened. It looked as if she had seen something behind them. Then she screamed and ran away. Rosemary did not understand what had happened, but when she turned around, what she saw made her blood run cold. Even in sunlight, a massive black shadow had formed inside the shadow of a building. That meant even during the day, the darkness could move through shade. It was alive. Rosemary saw the shadow moving toward Luke, so she quickly turned on the truck's headlights. Because of the light, Luke survived at the last second. Meanwhile, Paul had been waiting for James for a long time, but when James did not return, Paul went looking for him. He searched the bar, but James was nowhere to be found. Only one of James's glow sticks was lying there. Seeing this, Paul became very worried. He went down into the basement to search for him. After walking deeper inside, Paul discovered that there was a secret passage under the bar, so he quickly entered the tunnel to look for James. But when he reached the end of the tunnel, he found there was no way out. The path was blocked by a wall. Then Paul suddenly turned around, and at that exact moment, he saw the black shadow rushing toward him again. Within seconds, the shadow swallowed him. But then we realized that Paul had actually been dreaming all of this. However, even though it was a dream, the light above Paul suddenly went out. And this time, it was not a dream. The black shadow came for real, and in an instant, Paul disappeared into the air. On the other side, we see that James had survived because he still had his glow stick. A little later, when the lights came back on, James immediately went to check on Paul. But when he reached him, Paul was gone. Only his clothes remained. Paul had disappeared too. Meanwhile, Luke and Rosemary saw that the truck lights were also beginning to flicker on and off, so Luke somehow brought an antenna from another car. They wanted to use it to make a torch, but they did not have anything to light it with. Luke was in severe pain because of his injured foot. He could not run away from there, and the light in Rosemary's hand was also about to go out. With no other option, Rosemary began taking Luke to the hospital where she worked. When they reached the hospital, they found a lighter. Using that lighter, they finally lit the homemade torch. Then Rosemary told Luke that she wanted to get rubbing alcohol from the hospital. With the rubbing alcohol, they could keep fire burning. She told Luke to rest. Then she went alone toward the storage room. But suddenly she heard the sound of her baby crying. Hearing her own child's cry, Rosemary lost control of herself. She ran toward the baby crib where the sound was coming from. But we already know. This was a trap created by the black shadows, and in the very next moment, Rosemary fell into that trap. She disappeared forever. Luke saw it happen from a distance. He quickly took the truck and returned to the bar, but by then, the bar's generator had already died. Inside, James was sitting in a corner, terrified, and on the table, only Paul's clothes were left. Luke immediately understood what had happened to Paul. Now only James and Luke were alive. But what could they do now? They knew they could not just sit there and wait to die, so they made a plan. James would sit in the driver's seat of the truck, and Luke would use the generator to try to send power into the truck's engine. According to the plan, they did exactly that. James got into the truck. Luke desperately tried to use the generator to power the engine. After many attempts, they somehow managed to start the truck. But there was one big problem. All of the generator's power had been used to start the truck, so the entire bar suddenly lost electricity. And that was where the danger truly began. Luke was still alone inside the bar. As soon as the lights went out, the terrifying shadows came to take him. Luke ran for his life. Somehow he managed to get into the truck. Then the two of them escaped from there as fast as they could. But while escaping, the truck's hood was still open. When Luke went to close it, he suddenly saw a huge church in front of them. As they reached the church, James suddenly heard his mother's voice coming from inside. James became completely overwhelmed. Without thinking, he ran straight into the church. Luke shouted again and again, trying to stop him, because Luke knew very well that this was definitely another trap set by the shadows. But James did not listen, so Luke was forced to decide to leave alone. But just as he was about to start the truck, he noticed something written on the road. It was the same word Paul had talked about earlier, Croatoan. Meanwhile, James was slowly walking deeper into the church, and behind him the black shadow was moving closer. Just as the shadow was about to swallow him, Luke drove the truck straight into the church. Because of the truck's headlights, the shadow moved away from James. Luke begged James again and again to come with him, but James refused to listen. He ran deeper inside the church, still looking for his mother. Luke had no other choice. So he ran after James. But then the most terrifying thing happened. The truck's lights suddenly went out completely, and as soon as the light disappeared, the black shadow swallowed Luke. Just imagine that moment. Now James was the only one left alive. Terrified, James quickly ran toward the candles inside the church and sat in front of them. Because of the candlelight, the black shadows could not harm him. James spent the entire night there, exhausted and afraid. The next morning, when James woke up, he saw the same little girl standing in front of him, the girl we had seen earlier. She had also been hiding inside the church all this time. James was surprised and asked her how she had survived for so long. The little girl told him that she had a special light. It worked with solar power. During the day, she charged it using sunlight, and at night, that light kept her safe. After hearing this, James felt a little hopeful. He took the little girl with him and stepped outside the church. By then, sunlight had spread everywhere. For the moment, they had nothing to fear. Now they wanted to go to Chicago, the city where the reporter had said some survivors were still alive. They found a horse, and using that horse, they began their journey toward the unknown city of Chicago. But at that exact moment, they saw something strange. In the sunlight and the shadows of the buildings, 3 human-shaped figures appeared. Seeing this, James realized who those 3 shadows were. They were Luke, Paul, and Rosemary. James understood that the people taken by the darkness had not completely disappeared. They had turned into shadows, and those shadows were now pulling other people into the darkness. And with this scene, the movie Vanishing on 7th Street comes to an end. Just like the real mystery of 1590, this disappearance remains unsolved. In the end, the vanishing of these people remains nothing but a terrifying mystery, a mystery whose answer no one has ever found.